Hi, everyone. I'm Diane Brady. I'm here with my colleague, Giacomo Tonini, who is a staff writer on the Wealth team. We're talking about the Adanis. Giacomo, welcome. And
Hi there.
you've done a couple of stories at this point now about not just Gautam Adani, who is, of course, one of the world's richest men, but his brother, Vinod. Tell us about Vinod, the role he plays.
Of course. So Vinod is a really interesting figure. He's the oldest of the Adani brothers. There are eight siblings in total. Gautam is obviously the best known one. He leads the Adani Group. And until recently, he was the third richest person in the world. Vinod is interesting because he's always been sort of in the background. Very little is known about him. There's only one photo of him in public. He variously lives in Singapore or in Dubai. He has a Cyprus passport. And what we found, myself and my colleague John Hyatt, is that Vinod is really the person who's sort of in the background, orchestrating a lot of the deals that the Adani Group conducts. So he has his own fortune separate from Gotham that we found through. He has several entities, for example, in Mauritius, an offshore tax haven, that own billions of dollars in stock in Adani companies. And so he is not public at all. He's in the background using his entities in Mauritius to organize these deals, like I mentioned. And also, we found some other transactions off the books. And for example, the Hindenburg research report from the U.S. short seller Hindenburg Research that came out in late January also detailed a lot of the activities that Vinod was conducting.
Which really was the instigating event for a lot of these challenges as short seller. Let's talk about the relative wealth. So, let's start with Gautam and how much he is worth. How much is Vinod worth too? So, because we don't hear much about him.
So it's interesting because you're looking at these filings and all they have a very complex ownership structure. Gautam, as recently as September, is worth more than $150 billion. He was the third richest person in the world. And so what we had done was we attributed all of these entities, including family trusts, to Gautam. What we found in our research is that several of them are actually owned completely by Vinod. So the thing is, even with those funds, Vinod, he's still a very wealthy person. We estimate his net worth at around $6 billion. Gautam now is around $35 billion. As of today, the market closed on Monday, February 27th.
Wow.
So he's not nearly as wealthy as Gautam. And just one detail I'd like to add here is that much of Gautam's net worth comes from his ownership of this family trust. It's called the SB Adani Family Trust. But even there, it's this offshore trust that is co-owned. The beneficial owners are Vinod, Gautam, another brother, Rajesh, and two other brothers, of which very little is known. And the trustees are Gautam, Vinod, and Rajesh. So it's very possible that Vinod's net worth is actually higher. We don't know the exact breakdown.
And the other brothers
trust.
Too, right? I mean, let's just clarify that there's nothing inherently illegal about having offshore entities or not necessarily being the person who is highly visible. So what is it that Vinod has done that has raised questions and put him on the radar?
So, right, exactly. And one thing that's important to note is that much of the information that we found has been publicly disclosed in stock exchange filing or other corporate disclosures. So the main allegations regarding Vinod that came out in the Hindenburg report was that he effectively is the center of these offshore entities that Hindenburg alleges were used for stock parking and for inflating the stock prices of these companies. There's 8 Adani Group companies that are looked at in the report and that we track. And the allegations that Hindenburg looked at were that outside of the entities we've talked about before, so the ones that we know are owned by family members, there's several other funds, most of them in Mauritius, which are treated as non-Adani, family linked, but that have very suspicious histories or transactions. For several of them, the only assets that they own are Adani Group stocks, and Vinod is a director at many of these firms, as is Subia Mitra, who is another Adani associate at the Adani family office. And so that's really the heart of the allegations. And Vinod has not really been very public at all. And so he is, variously over the years, sometimes disclosed in these Adani public filings, as a related party, as a member of the family, and an owner of these entities that do own stock that is considered part of the Adani family. And then at other times, his name is never mentioned, and only the entities are mentioned. In its response to the Hindenburg allegations, the Adani Group company said that he has no role in the day-to-day affairs of the Adani Group companies. But I'd like to just flag one specific deal, which I think sort of is interesting in the light of that statement, is that last year, the Adani Group purchased a majority stake in Ambuja Cements and ACC, two very large cement companies in India. And the filings show that the entire deal, it was $6.5 billion, was carried out by an offshore company in Mauritius, owned by Vinod. And the filings disclose it. He's there. It shows the entire ownership structure. And so it's very curious, to me and those of us here at Forbes have been looking into this, that someone who has no role in the day-to-day affairs of the company is leading such a large acquisition that's so important.
Is he being scapegoated to some extent? Because short sellers, sometimes they will raise issues that can be addressed by the company. They make their profit and everybody goes their separate ways. And then there are the allegations of outright fraud that essentially end up being a criminal matter. Which camp does this fall into?
I think that's an interesting question. I mean, outside of the Hindenburg report, there had been a lot of reporting in the Indian press over the years about various allegations against the Adanis. There is apparently an investigation that is going on now in India. There haven't been much detail on it, but that appears to be on the cards. And from our research, I think that more than scapegoating, what appears to be the case is that Gautam is the public face of the company and presumably is the one that has the most control over the day-to-day affairs. But that when it comes to financing large deals or finding ways to optimize the tax side of these deals, as we've been told by several experts that we spoke to, that Vinod is sort of the key man. I mean, he's been in Dubai since at least the early 1990s. He was trading commodities before then. As I mentioned earlier, he has these connections, long time connections in these various countries, and there's nothing illegal about that. I want to really emphasize that.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that it does seem like he is the person that's sort of orchestrating these things, and then Gautam is sort of the one who's actually in the company day to day and representing it to the world.
And also has traditionally been very close to Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. How has that shifted as more of this negative publicity has come out about Adani Group? Anything about the fate of the company and how it's being portrayed in the Indian media or rhetoric in government?
Right. So there has been quite a strong response from some of the Indian government to, call this Hindenburg report a conspiracy. And of course, they are a short seller. They stand to profit from their bets against the company. But again, going back to Indian media reports in past several years, and also the Adani Group has a coal mine project in Australia that's very controversial. There's been a lot of investigators and people concerned about that in Australia that have done a lot of research over the years. The Adani Group's, the share prices of the companies have, gone down a lot in the last month or so since the report was released. So there's been a definite impact on its share price. The Adani Enterprises, the flagship company, canceled a follow-on public offering as a result of this. So there's been a clear impact on the company as far as its share price in the markets and investors go. As far as its relationship with the government, it's still sort of too early to say, but a lot of the Adani Group's success has come at the same time that Prime Minister Modi has been in power. They've gotten a lot of contracts for various infrastructure projects in the country that may or may not be tied to their influence and relationship with the government. But for the time being, it doesn't seem like there's been much of an impact from the report on those relationships. In the past, there have been allegations in Indian press that past investigations into initiatives and deals that the Adani Group was involved in were, either not carried out to their full extent or were shelved due to the government's relationship with the Adani Group. So in terms of the current investigation that should be starting in India, it's too early to tell what that relationship might do.
One interesting point to sum up this portion of what's going to be, I'm sure, an ongoing saga. Vinod has not been in India for, sounds like, 3 decades. That would seem to complicate matters if he is a much more powerful figure who does not reside in India and is not the public face of these companies. Is it going to make any difference, you think, to resolving the issues that Hindenburg has raised?
That's a good question. I think the fact that he is outside of India definitely complicates those things. I mean, we, for example, have found information thanks to the Center for Advanced Defense Securities in Washington that Vinod owns 37 properties in Dubai. He has an apartment in Singapore, registered in his name in Singapore filings. He is a Cyprus citizen, but also in the Dubai data, it shows he's an Indian citizen, which in theory is not legal in India because you can't have dual citizenship. So, it's very unclear where he is, where he's usually based, whether he even is an Indian citizen. So who knows what that means as far as potential legal ramifications from this. So it definitely does complicate it because he's at the heart of a lot of these, the transactions that we found, which are interesting. I'm not sure if they're going to be, in the realms of the investigation, but even going back to the allegations that Hindenburg had unearthed, he is a director of many of those entities that they accuse of, manipulating the stock price of these companies in violation of Indian law. So that is definitely going to be a big part of any future charges or anything else that might come out of this investigation.
International man of mystery. Well, look forward to continuing the conversation. Thanks, Giacomo.
Thank you, Diane.